أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. This is study number 6 of the Ramadan Daily Quran studies for the year 2020. I am Zahid Aziz from the Ahmadi Anjuman Islam Lahore, UK. On the subject of fasting, this is our last study on that particular subject. Since the Holy Quran says in its first verse of fasting that fasting is prescribed for you, O Muslims, as it was prescribed for those before you. So in this study, we'll look at two examples of what prophets and great founders of religion of previous times, before the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and what they said or did in connection with fasting. And the examples I'm taking in this study are the prophet Isaiah from the Bible, who in Islamic literature is recognized as a prophet of the Israelites, of the Bani Israel, although he is not mentioned by name in the Holy Quran. But he was a prophet of the Jews between the times of Moses and Jesus, Musa and Isa. And the second example I will take is that of Buddha, the founder of the religion known as Buddhism. Although, of course, he is not, we may say, directly mentioned with that name in the Holy Quran. But the Quran has taught us that prophets appeared in all nations, and it has told us that it has not mentioned all of them, that there are some whom it has mentioned and some not. And we do have grounds for considering that Gautama Buddha was a prophet. So let's take the case of Isaiah first. In his time, his people, the Bani Israel or Jews, complained to him that God has not taken any notice that they had been fasting. And God has not removed their troubles, even though they were fasting, that God may have mercy on them and remove their difficulties. So when the prophet Isaiah put this complaint to God, God gave the following reply, which I'll now read out from the book of Isaiah. God said this to the people through that prophet Isaiah. Look, at the same time you fast, you satisfy your selfish desires. You oppress your workers. Look, your fasting is accompanied by arguments, brawls, and fist fights. Do not fast as you do today, trying to make your voice heard in heaven. Is this really the kind of fasting I want? Do I want a day when people merely humble themselves, bowing their heads like a reed, and stretching out on sackcloth and ashes? Is this really what you call a fast, a day that is pleasing to the Lord? No. This is the kind of fast that I want. I want you to remove the sinful chains, to tear away the ropes of the burdensome yoke, to set free the oppressed, and to break every burdensome yoke. I want you to share your food with the hungry and to provide shelter for homeless, oppressed people. When you see someone naked, clothe him. Don't turn your back on your own flesh and blood. Then your light will shine like the sunrise. Your restoration will quickly arrive, and your godly behavior will go before you, and the Lord's splendor will be your rear guard. Then you will call out, and the Lord will respond. You will cry out, and he will reply, Here I am. You must remove the burdensome yoke from among you and stop pointing fingers and speaking sinfully. You must actively help the hungry and feed the oppressed. Then your light will dispel the darkness, and your darkness will be transformed into noonday. The book of Isaiah in the Bible, chapter 58, verses 3 to 10. So this then is the kind of fasting that prophets of Allah taught. And of course, the same kind of fasting is required by Islam, as clearly stated in the Quran and as shown by the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in his life. Now, the second example is that of the man known as Buddha. He was born as Prince Siddhartha about 500 years before Jesus. Buddha was not his name. Buddha was the title that was bestowed on him when he started preaching his mission. Now, before that, he lived some 500 years before Jesus. And before he started his mission, he wanted to discover the truth about the purpose of life and to know about the moral and spiritual development of man. And this is also what our Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was trying to do in the cave of Hira before revelation came to him. Now, what Hindu priests told Buddha, because he arose in the Hindu religion, priests told him that if you deprive the body of its comforts and its needs and test it with hardship and rigor, then your spirit will become strengthened and your mind will become enlightened to the truth. So Buddha went to a forest and tried all this hardship, which are known as his austerities. He tried all this hardship of giving up food and drink completely. And this was severe fasting with very little intake of food and drink. And you might have seen some statues or images of Buddha where you can see all his bones sticking out because of the severe fasting. Now, as a result, Buddha became emaciated and extremely weak. And in that state of weakness, he realized that he couldn't actually achieve anything because he was so weak. He couldn't do anything. And what he learned from this was that you have to follow the path of moderation and not extreme deprivation. And he called this the middle way. And Buddha said, from now on, I will take the middle way. I shall neither starve my body nor feed it too richly, but I will eat just what is needed and no more. And I'm sure you're well aware that Islam also teaches us to follow a middle way in eating and drinking and in spending money and in working for our physical needs and comforts, and a middle way also in performing acts of worship such as prayer and fasting. And you might call the middle way Sirat-e-Mustaqim. And as you know, the Muslims are called in the Quran Ummatan Wasta, that is to say, a community which sticks to the middle. Now, this experience which Buddha had, it's in line with the following verse of the Quran. Awaman kana matan fa'ahyanahu wajalna lahu nuran yamshi bihi fin nase kamam mathaluhu fi zulumati laysa bi kharijin minha, which is translated as, is he who was dead, then we raised him to life and made for him a light by which he walks among the people. Is such a person who was dead and Allah raised him to life, is he like that person who is like someone in darkness from which he can't come forth? So a spiritually dead Buddha was raised to life. He'd become extremely weak, almost dead, through his fasting. But then he lightened his fasting, made it less severe, and he was raised to life and given this light and guidance with which to preach to people. So he was almost dead due to his severe fasting, but the realization came to him that he must follow the middle path. So he took some food and drink, and he came to life not only physically, but also achieved spiritual life and awakening. He was given a light for people, and he is himself known as the light of Asia. So, although Buddha realized through extremely hard fasting, that it doesn't lead to any benefit, but fasting, that experience did bring him enlightenment and understanding. Although what he realized was that it shouldn't be the severe, extremely hard fasting. And in a book about fasting, there's a book called Fasting, an Exceptional Human Experience. And there is a section in it on Buddha's fasting. And it says there, and I quote, the Buddha's fasting experiences played a central role in the formation of Buddhism. The Buddha spoke highly of fasting and said that during his fasts, my soul becomes brighter, my spirit more alive in wisdom and truth. Some historians believe that the Buddha's fasting experience was the spiritual vehicle for his enlightenment. His experience illustrates how the physiological and spiritual changes during a fast affect an individual over time, both during and afterwards, both before, during, and afterward the fast. And after fasting is over, a spiritual awakening can occur. So I've given these examples because the experiences of these earlier prophets bear out the statement in the Quran that fasting has been prescribed for Muslims as it was prescribed for those before them meaning those in the earlier religions. And the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself sometimes performed very hard fasting, which lasted more than one day. Unlike our fasting in Ramadan, he didn't end the fast, but carried it on continuously. But he strictly forbade his followers from indulging in that, because he said, I can bear this fasting since Allah gives me to eat and drink. So he was able to undertake that very hard fasting, the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but he almost more or less forbade it to his followers. And with that, study number 6 comes to an end. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.